начинаем нашу пресс-конференцию. Вопросы можно задать любые, по съемке нет ограничений. Пожалуйста, можно приступать. Ну, наверное, первый вопрос, да, по традиции будет как перелет, как в Москве себя ощущает музыкант.
How was your flight here? How's Moscow?
We didn't fly, we came on a tour bus from Finland.
Мы приехали из Финляндии на автобусе, наверное, многие знают.
Роман, руководитель гитарной школы Игоря Сандлера. Как за границей начинается увлечение гитарной музыкой? Потому что у нас долго был железный занавес, и даже 10-15 лет назад было сложно купить инструмент. А как люди к этому приходят не в России?
Well, I mean, I think these days it's easier than ever, you know, because you have so much high-quality professional home studio equipment. You know, you can record music to a very high standard at home for a relatively small amount of money. The problem is the market. Does the market still exist for rock music? I don't know about here in Russia, but in the UK, if you're a new rock band now, you're very much going to be an underground band. There is very little what I would call rock music in the mainstream in the UK these days. There's like Foo Fighters, that's it. Mainstream rock, that's it. Everyone else is like what you call an underground band now, which is fine because it means the music is kind of liberated to be more experimental, more ambitious, less commercial, but it's also frustrating to be so marginalized by the mainstream.
Вам нужно перевести?
Ну, я понял. Еще один вопрос. Какая была первая гитара и какие исполнители повлияли, какие артисты, какие музыканты на творчество?
My first guitar, when I was about 6 years old, my parents forced me to learn guitar with a kind of nylon string classical guitar, and I absolutely hated it. I absolutely hated it. And the guitar, after about 6 weeks, they gave up, and the guitar went into the attic in the house. What actually originally inspired me eventually to take an interest in music was not musicians, it was more the idea of being a producer. So I was always more interested in being able to make these kind of cinematic experiences for the ears. So the kind of people that really inspired me, people like Frank Zappa, David Bowie, Roger Waters, Jeff Lynne from Electric Light Orchestra, more the guys that had a kind of vision. I was never particularly interested in being a guitar hero. I was always more interested in the people that had the ideas and the visions, you know.
И еще один последний. Кем вы себя больше ощущаете? Продюсером, музыкантом или артистом? Или есть ли в этом разница какая-то?
It probably doesn't matter, but I mean, I would describe myself as a producer-writer, not a musician. I mean, I have fantastic musicians in my band that are way better than me, which is fine because I'm not interested in being, you know, a guitar hero or a great singer. But what I like to be able to do is order everyone around, you know. You do that, you do this, you do that. So that's the kind of privilege of the guy that writes the songs and the guy that produces the records. So I would describe myself producer-writer.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Можно, да, вопросы задавать?
Давайте.
Да, конечно.
Да, задавайте.
My name is Mona.
Hi.
Hi. Well, talking about David Bowie, just mentioned him. I know that you include in your set list the song Space Oddity.
Right. Right.
Well, actually, the question is, what are your feelings about the loss of David Bowie for the world? And will we hear, I don't know, several cover songs and recordings from you?
Of Bowie?
Yeah.
No, I think it's not the sort of thing I think I would record and release, but it's a nice thing to do as part of the show. To answer the first part of your question, my feelings about Bowie, I mean, I felt it very strongly, and you know, when you look at the last 6 months and you look at all the the bad stuff that's happened in the rock world, whether it was the shootings of the Bataclan in Paris or the death of people like Lemmy and Bowie, and there's been other people that have passed away with us. It's not been the greatest time, but for me personally, the Bowie thing was the most shocking. And I think one of the reasons I felt it so strongly is that for me, David Bowie is symbolic somehow of the golden age of pop and rock music, which has passed. And there's no getting away from the fact that there will never be another time in rock and pop music the way things were in the 60s, 70s, and to an extent the 80s. And here's a guy that presided over all of that era, and in many ways is, you know, what the Beatles were to the 60s, Bowie was to the 70s. And for me, the 70s is the golden era of experimental rock music, by which I mean the album was more important than the 3-minute pop song. That artists were actually encouraged to be ambitious, to think outside the box, not to be generic, not to just write, you know, cute pop songs. And I think that era has passed, unfortunately. And so for me, when someone like David Bowie dies, it's almost like that's like a symbolic closing of a chapter. And that's very sad to me, because I mean, that's, from a musical perspective, that's what I love. I love that era of rock music. I love the album. I'm not so interested in pop videos and singles. I love the idea of the album as a kind of cinematic experience. And here's a guy that kind of, perhaps more than anyone, you know, revolutionized that idea of pop being something that could be as intellectual and as serious as cinema, literature, painting. So I felt it very, I was really shocked. I was really shocked. Much more than I would have expected to have been, actually.
My other question was about the new D for the pop.
Yeah.
What was the process of elimination? I mean, I think you have lots and lots and lots of recordings that aren't included in the albums.
Right.
So what was the process of elimination one song, and which one did you choose?
I think
Was there some kind of concept behind it?
the simple answer to that question is these are songs that I thought were as good as all the other songs that I'd written for the albums, but they just didn't fit conceptually. So I have this thing where every time I make an album I have this kind of story or this grand concept, whether it's the Hank Etta Ray's concept or the concept of the previous album, which is about ghost stories. But there are always songs which don't fit in conceptually, even though I think they're good songs and I'm really proud of them. So these are what you might call the orphan songs. They're the songs that I was as proud of as any of the others, but they just lyrically, conceptually, they just didn't fit. So the answer to your question is no, there is no, on this particular EP, there is no thing that kind of unifies all of the songs, which in itself is a concept, you know. These are all the songs that were left over.
Thank you.
Okay.
Можно, да? Владимир, журнал «Рок». Вопрос следующий. Есть ли какие-то конкретные планы, ну скажем, на ближайшие года два, по реализации одного из многочисленных проектов? Очень много. И нет ли у него планов поработать с каким-либо музыкантом, с кем он не сотрудничал до того?
I don't have any plans right now. I mean, I love to change. The thing is about being a musician is that, you know, you're always the same. And one of the ways you keep evolving as an artist is by changing the people around you. You know, that's one of the things Bowie was really good at, you know, always changing the collaborators. So I think the answer to your question is I don't have any plans, but I definitely want to do something different every time I do a new album. I'm looking to do something which interests me, excites me, feels like an evolution. And part of that is working with different players and different musicians. I can't tell you who right now, because I haven't written any songs. And I think part of it is when you write the songs, certain musical sounds or musical approaches suggest themselves, and that's when I start thinking about who I might want to work with.
Можно, да?
Да.
Ткаченко Андрей, директор нескольких групп музыкальных. У меня такой вопрос. Что можете посоветовать для молодых исполнителей, как для музыкантов, так и для продюсеров, с своей точки зрения? С чего начинать, как продвигать?
Okay, there's a really important question that I would ask. You use the word, I guess the gentleman used the word career, right? For me, there's a very big difference between starting out as a musician that wants to express themselves creatively and someone who wants to have a career in the music industry. Because I think to have a career in the music industry now is almost impossible. Almost impossible. And I say that from the perspective of being a musician who has some kind of vocation to be creative. If you want to be an entertainer, that's a different thing. If you want to be an entertainer and just give people what they want, make something very generic, very formulaic, go on X Factor, go on whatever it is, to me that's not really the music industry, that's the entertainment industry. That's an industry about being generic, about doing what the industry wants you to do. That's not what being a musician is about for me. Being a musician for me is about responding to some kind of creative calling within you. And my advice is always, you know, if anyone asks me, so do it because you love it. Don't even think about having a career. If you get a career, like I have a career almost by accident. I'm one of the lucky ones because I've never compromised. I've never done anything that I didn't want to do. And luckily for me, partly because I started 20 years ago and I think it was still just about possible then, I've been very lucky. I have a career doing what I want. I'm not a mainstream artist. Most people you ask on the street would never have heard of me. But I have enough fans that I can do it, make a living from it, without having to compromise. Now, I don't know if you can do that. Maybe there's still some people that do that and manage to find a career out of it. But that word worries me, career. That word worries me because that implies all sorts of compromises in order to get. Do you know what I mean?
И какие музыкальные коллективы из России можете выделить?
I don't think so. I don't think I do. No. Who might I know?
Может быть, вы подскажете, кого Стивен может знать из русских исполнителей?
I have the morning, I think.
Oh.
Guys from Porcupine Tree are working with them.
I've heard. Yes, I haven't heard them, but I've heard of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because they're on the same label as me.
Yeah. Well, that's about it.
That's it. Okay.
I don't want to show you.
Он, наверное, знает, но она не поет.
Можно дальше вопрос? Что вами движет, когда вы перерабатываете свои старые песни? Например, Don't Hate Me, последний альбом.
I mean, there's no great master plan. I just, when I go out on tour now, I like to play some of my older material. And, I have I have 20 years worth of songs, And some people say to me, oh, you're playing that old Porcupine Tree song. I say, no, I'm not. I'm playing that old Stevena Wilson song. You know what I mean? It just happens that Porcupine Tree were the band that recorded the first version. But I think a lot of these songs are, to me, they still seem very relevant. And I'm picking songs that mean something to me. I'm not saying to myself, which songs would the fans like to hear? Like yesterday in St. Petersburg, everyone was shouting out for this song, Trains. I'm not interested in playing that song, but I'm playing what you might call more deep cuts, as the Americans would call it, obscure album songs, which are personal favourites of mine, and which I guess I feel have still got some relevance. There's one song on 4.5 called Don't Hate Me, which actually I wrote in 1998, and lyrically it connects very, very well to the Hand Cannot Erase album, because it's a song about the loneliness of living in the heart of a city, which is exactly what Hand Cannot Erase is about. So there are certain songs that still seem to me very current and very relevant, and my band interpret them in a very different way, so yeah.
Лилия, Рок-Портал EQ, в тему как раз о вопросах популярности. Вы получили множество наград, были номинированы на Грэмми. Как вы вообще относитесь к этому и как относитесь к успеху последнего вашего альбома?
What do I think about awards? They're fun, but they're ridiculous. The idea that music is some kind of Olympic sport is, of course, absolutely absurd. But I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't fun to receive some kind of award or accolade. Of course it's fun, but I think I also acknowledge to myself that it is ridiculous. You know, the idea that you can be the best album, the best artist, it's of course a purely subjective thing. And very often, a lot of these awards, it comes down to who's got the most fans. You know, the best example I can give you of that, there was a poll about 5 years ago for the best drummer in the world, and I've forgotten his name, but the drummer from Slipknot won it. I'm sorry, he's not the best drummer in the world. He's got the most fans, so they voted for him. So I think that kind of, in a way, illustrates the absurdity slightly of it. But it's fun. You know, and one of the things about awards is at least it gets people talking, you know. It's like best album of the year, and then if that's kind of announced in the press, you see all the fans start to argue, you know, that no, that was not something, this is the best album of the year, no, this, and people get introduced to music that way, you know. So I think in that sense, to see my name at the top of a poll is great, because people might say, oh, I've never heard Stivena Wilson, but he's, you know, I should go and check that out. So in a way, it becomes another form of promoting what you do, but it is ridiculous, yeah, and fun.